Can I ask all mobile phones to switch off out of silent, please? Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. Councillors Hart, Hargreaves, Pugh, Simon, Oliver, Thompson, and Councillor Ryder, though I was expecting Councillor Ryder, so she may be late. And Councillor Crane as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I must say the timing of this meeting has been impossible for us today because of everyone who works.
Yeah.
With the 3 meetings during the day plus regulatory tomorrow. We did ask for the meeting to be held in the evening, but it wasn't possible, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. We've got an apology, yeah.
Councillor White, Mr Mayor.
Councillor White, yeah, you got them?
Laven. Councillor Robson as well.
Yeah. Councillor Nightingale?
Councillor Morgan, Councillor Jones, Councillor George, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Ovens, Councillor Head, and I suspect that Councillor Cobley is on his way.
Right, thank you. Have we got all them written down, yeah? A lot, yeah? I think so, yeah. Thank you. We've also got an apology from Councillor Richardson, who has declared an interest as an employer may be involved in the tender process if it gets that far. Right, the green form is going round for any interests. Right, so we move on from the motion. So this is a continuation of the debate of the motion that was adjourned at the Borough Council meeting held on the 3rd of April 2025, which is set out in your agenda. At the point of adjournment, the motion had been introduced by the proposer, Councillor Leroy, seconded by Councillor Paul McGuinness, who reserved the right to speak. The debate will continue from this point. Do we have an indication if anyone wants to speak, please? Councillor Anaway.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have an amendment to the motion, which has just been organised by Councillor Davies, who I'm sure will be here any second now. But as he isn't, I'd better introduce it. So the amendment adds on to the motion, and I think this has just been discussed with the monitoring officer, that this council requests that the final decision reverts to an executive function rather than being made on delegation. Yeah.
If it's a recommendation, then yes, it can be put forward as that. Adjournment.
Adjournment, yeah, that's what I said.
Well, we haven't yet got a seconder on council.
Well, I'm the seconder, but no, thank you very much.
Right, so can we get that circulated?
Yeah, so I'll be the proposer now then, and Councillor Cole.
Yeah. Councillor Davies is working on. In fact, here is Councillor Davies.
I've just had to propose it, and Councillor Kerr has seconded it.
They're just doing it.
It's an executive decision that will revert back to the administration of the council, and because my party line I'm banning any future building of that, I would be defaulted and to rejecting the proposal. So whether or not you want to look at full council rather than an executive decision, because I would be predetermined by the party I represent and the ban on any future incinerators.
Let's have a look what the Councillor Davies, can you speak on the amendment, please, or say what it is, and we'll have a look what it is first, yeah?
Yeah, I can. It was just in the process of getting printed, so I was just quite happy to wait until it came in. But as it's come in, yeah, I can give you the wording anyway. So the recommendation would be that this council recommends that these issues are considered at a formal meeting of cabinet before any award of contract is made, basically reverting the decision to a council decision, like a cabinet decision. But if he wants to change it to a council decision, and it comes back to a full council meeting, happy with that either way. But ultimately, it's an executive decision already.
Chair, I mean, there can be a recommendation for a council decision, but it is an executive function, so it's either a cabinet decision or a delegated matter. Currently, it's a delegated matter. Council can recommend that cabinet consider themselves, but it is a recommendation.
Whether or not he accepts that recommendation, just as in the original motion. Is that right, from my understanding?
The recommendation is directed at cabinet to consider it at a formal meeting of the cabinet, but it is a recommendation.
So, point of order, clarification, Mr. Mayor. So, if the recommendation is for it to go back to cabinet, cabinet doesn't want to take that decision because it would involve them in then can cabinet make it a full council decision?
Yeah. Sorry, to get into esoteric detail of local government law, councils operate various models of governance. So councillors will know that Middlesbrough, for example, have an elected mayor. We don't have that. We operate with what's called a leader and cabinet model. And there are a set of regulations called the Local Authority Functions and Responsibilities Regulations. I can't remember the year, but basically what they say is that some matters are reserved to full council, and those tend to be things like policy arrangements, planning arrangements, which can either be made by full council or delegated down through committees. So, for example, planning decisions within this council are delegated down to regulatory committee. Most decisions, however, are executive functions and fall to the cabinet to make. So the decisions around the incinerator, other than the award of planning permission, are executive decisions to be made by the cabinet or through officer delegations. A couple of years ago, there was a decision made to proceed with this project, and as it stands, the contract award decision is delegated to the managing director in consultation with various others. So if nothing changes, then that delegation remains in place, and the decision for the award of contract and the outcome of the procurement exercise lies with the MD, whoever that is at the time. It's role specific, not person specific. As I understand it, the intention of Councillor Davies' amendment is to say, before the contract award is made, then Cabinet should have another look at these issues in a formal meeting of the Cabinet. It is still a recommendation, so if nothing changes, then that delegation remains in place and it would still be an officer decision.
We would be predetermined, and whether or not, because the party that we represent has banned any future building of them or paused them, so I'd be governed by that.
To the best of my knowledge, Cabinet cannot delegate essentially an executive decision to the full council. Yeah.
Motion hasn't passed. I'm not delegating anything to anyone. I'm asking Wayne to maybe revise his amendment.
The validity of the amendment, the executive can't pass on their decision-making functions to the full council.
This amendment that we've just received just says amendment moved and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't actually say what is being deleted, what is being added, or, well, perhaps it is just added, but this is then contradictory to the recommendations in the original motion, which effectively is saying that the project should be terminated. So I think we need some clarification from the mover and seconder, if it's at all within their ability to give it to us. Exactly what it is we're actually making the decision making.
Yeah, so just on that, Mr. Mayor, if I would have been in here and moved it as originally planned, I would have said that nothing in any of the of what Tristan had put all the way up to the actual recommendation part is the only part that's been amended. Is that part of the motion that Councillor Leroy had put in right at the very end with the recommendation, so that basically just take the recommendation out altogether and insert the amendment which is as written.
Right, just sanctify it.
I can potentially speak in there.
Yeah. Can the managing director?
Oh, yes. Have we had a seconder for that? Obviously, Councillor. 2 seconds. You've been given this? No, I've asked a seconder. Just spoke. Yeah. Go on.
Just if
I think it really requires the mover of the original motion to tell us whether he accepts the motion, the amendment, or he doesn't. And we would be very grateful for him to elucidate on this particular matter.
Councillor Nightingale, he doesn't have to. I'll put you over to the monitoring officer. Explain a bit more.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand it, as explained by Councillor Davies, his amendment is that the motion remains intact right up to the word recommends, and this paragraph here essentially replaces that paragraph. So the whole thing is there up to the recommendation point, and then this paragraph is to replace that. So the rest of the words are deleted from there and replaced. If we've got an amendment and it's seconded, then Councillor Leroy, as the proposer of the original motion, has a right of reply at the end of the debate on the amendment. So he can speak at the end of the debate on the amendment. So if we've got a proposer and a seconder, then we should debate the amendment until its conclusion, unless there's an intervention in terms of an adjournment.
No, because that wording's been taken out. That wording has been taken out as part of this amendment.
Can I say second?
Adjournment. Yeah. Right, hang fire. We need to have a seconder for the adjournment and then voted on.
Seconded, Mr. Mayor.
All those in favour, yeah? Thank you. 15 minutes, yeah? 3:30. Councillors, can we settle down, please, councillors? Right, just before we start, if any councillors want to speak, can you speak into the mic? The members above in the gallery, public, are struggling to hear us, so if you could speak straight in the mic so everyone can hear you, yeah? Thank you. I'm just going to bring Steve Newton in, see where we are at this point. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think where we are is that we have an amendment proposed from Councillor Davies, and then we have that seconded by Councillor Hannaway. I don't think Councillor Hannaway had mentioned whether he was reserving the right to speak or speaking, but right. Okay. Yeah. So we're on with the debate on the amendment, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Leroyd, as proposer of the original motion, can speak, but only at the end of that debate on the amendment.
Right, thank you very much. Everyone clear now? Right, motion's up for debate. Councillor Brown. On the amendment, yeah?
On the amendment. Just to say that, in principle, the Labour Group supports your amendment, Councillor Davies. However, I would say, Mr. Mayor, can we have one meeting, please? Sorry, Mr. Mayor. But I would say with a caveat that if it does come back, if the delegated officer does send it back to the Cabinet, then the party line is that we ban future building of incinerators, and the Cabinet would very much continue that party line.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaway, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Brown, for that clarification. And I understand that it's an awkward situation for you to have it back if the amendment does pass. But I think you'd agree with me that the way this decision has been made, it's not a great look, is it, for the public, that it was made years ago and that we are being asked to vote on it now. But at the same time, we have no say in the sense that, you know, the decision has already been delegated, and also secondly, it's been delegated to a managing director who is leaving. So there's the added problem of trying to explain that to the public as well, that he's just going to say yes, bye, you know, and it really, I mean, I know it wasn't ever intended to be a stitch-up, but it really looks like that, and it is a very serious decision and a very important one. And I don't personally have a definite, you know, outcome that I'd prefer. On the one hand, I think it's unlikely that our recycling rates would ever get high enough that we would have to pay the fee rather than sending the waste. But equally, the environmental arguments are also very strong, and would any of us really want to live near it? So I think the public view is one we need to take into account. And in democratic terms, it's surely much better that the decision is made by politicians rather than by bureaucrats. Thank you.
This administration, independent-led one, not us.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support we support the amendment, and I support what Councillor Hannaway has just said. It's a major decision, shouldn't be delegated to an officer. It's a political decision, and it should be owned, and I welcome what the leader has said as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at Councillor Davies. Already spoken. You've already spoken, so you can't speak again. Sorry, that's why we had a little chit chat about Councillor Leroy, because he put his button on and he has to speak at the end. That's why I've left him at the end. Right, I've got no more speakers. Anybody else want to indicate before I go to Councillor Leroy? No? Right, Councillor Leroy, please, to sum up on the amendment.
On the amendment, yeah. I'm in two minds about the amendment. First of all, in terms of my original motion, it clearly lays my sentiments clear in terms of, going back to the wording, in terms of rejecting this proposal or recommending the rejection of this proposal. And it's on various grounds. Just as a point of clarification now, Do I get to speak only once now? In this instance, it's passed. Okay, so I shall give you the full blurb. In 2018, this was a project that was probably taken with good consideration, but since 2018, many things have changed. First of all, it was pre-carbon trading scheme. The carbon trading scheme, as I've outlined in
2 seconds, Steve. Sorry, Councillor Lee, 2 seconds.
No, you do get to speak again on the main motion. So this is summing up on the amendment.
Right.
So you will get another go on.
So we sum up on the amendment.
Yeah.
Then sound tip, and then
Yeah.
get to speak again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And is there any differential in terms of how long I can speak between those two?
At the
periods?
moment, you've got
Right.
3 minutes.
Brilliant.
50.
Right, let me run
48
through.
seconds.
Let me run through where we are. I think the situation that we've got now, where this has been delegated to potentially Mr. Archer in the future, is not reasonable in terms of democratic procedure and of a project of this magnitude. It's 2.4 billion overall. It is huge. When I've been looking at similar like-for-like costs, they're around about 1.3, 1.4 billion. We have £1 billion gap in the difference between this project and similar projects. For example, Wilton 11. I've heard of no inflation like it. If we look at pre-2019, when this was first conceived, there was no 45% reduction in targets of waste. That has since come in. That will reduce the tonnage for these 7 councils to 247,000 tonnes. Remember that the penalty clause sets in below 310,000. And this is happening because there is plastic film coming in, recycling, food waste recycling, deposit scheme recycling. And then I will add to this mix that there has been a change in ownership in terms of where this is to be sited. So back at the original time, it was under government control or even STDC control. It's now changed. It became part of the T-Spot as well. So the financial oversight and the regulatory enforcement in this particular area is minimal. And we should all bear that in mind. In terms of the finances, I've been asking since the 4th of April for the land option to be supplied. This is not a controversial thing to ask for. I want to know how much will the council pay over 50 years. That has not been supplied to me by 2 councils. In addition, for the need argument, which hasn't been demonstrated, the questions around the site, there are also questions with regards to the tender itself. So in terms of the tender, there are penalty clauses in there for not hitting waste. There is an increased gate fee to pay for the tender that failed. We're now left with one tender, and this one tender is owned by a company called KKR. And guess what KKR are doing? Pulling out of energy from waste. They do not want to be involved in incineration. Why? Because there are too many incinerators. Not my word, the government's words in their December the 30th, 2024 residual waste notice. So therefore, in terms of the amendment, I understand the merit of transferring this to Cabinet. I don't understand what difference it would potentially make. Today, my feelings are that we should give a strong signal that we reject this. And that will put the democratic pressure onto Mr. Archer, unfortunately, who will then have to make his decisions in light of our democratic will of the people.
Thank you. Yep, so we're going to go to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour, please show. That's carried, thank you. So we debate the amendment. Yeah, as a substantive motion. So do we have a... Because there's now the substantive motion.
The amendment's accepted, it then becomes the substantive motion, and we can then recommence the debate. And if, there may be no more speakers, but there is another vote.
All right, yeah. Right, open for debate. Councillor Leroy? Hold on, 2 seconds.
Councillor Leroy may speak again, but as the proposer of the successful amendment, Councillor Davies would sum up at the end.
Switch your mic off, that's why I am, Councillor Leroy, please.
Thank you. Can carry on now. So we've just had a briefing here, and I'm just going to address some of the points in the briefing. So first of all, with regards to Wilton 11, Wilton 11 is the site which has got 450,000 tonne capacity. It's right next to your ward, Councillor Brooke. It was approved, well, it started becoming functional in 2018. It's not true that it only burns the waste of Merseyside. Within its capacity last year, there was a spare 120,000 tonnes, and this went piecemeal to various different counties, including Newcastle and Durham. In terms of Haverton Hill, where we sent our waste last year, they too were taking waste from all over the country. And indeed, if you look at Wales, in Wales, incinerators are now, they've got a viable competition there where the price is lowering for the gate fee to encourage waste. As such, Wilton managed to attract some waste from Wales recently by lowering their gate fees. In addition, there is Allerton, and this has something in common with regards to Haverton Hill. These two incinerators last year were granted an exception not to recycle. Why? Because over the next, till 2039, in the case of Haverton Hill, and in the case of Allerton until 2042, they don't have to recycle because they can't hit the volumes, which means that they get hit with excessive penalty charges. This is exactly where we're headed if we continue with regards to the turf. What I'll also add in there, and it will be covered potentially by more articulate people than me in this, is in terms of the electricity ownership. We don't own the electric. And in terms of the electric reducing the gate fees, when you look at the tender, it does not state that. I'm going to move on just in terms of the aspects to public health now. If you consider one incinerator in isolation, it is possible that it will fall under acceptable limits. Not safe, 30 micrograms per metre cubed, micrograms per metre cubed is not a safe limit. It has just been proven not to be harmful at the moment. If you then, and we've had a look at the report myself and Councillor Earl to this respect, where once you start adding in other industries, and once you start adding other incinerators, and in this particular site there are already 2 active, and there will be a 3rd, which is just going through the process now, which will be active, you're going to add in another, the microparticulate level could be well over 100, which is unprecedented, and this does cause harm. So when you look at one in isolation, it may not, but we have this cumulative effect. And finally, there's obviously the effect in terms of the carbon output. The carbon output from this is far greater than the whole of the borough will ever put out itself. No matter what we do, there is nothing we could take, no step we'll be able to take in our lives which will be more important to reducing carbon than not producing this incinerator. Why? Because as I've demonstrated already, with a 45% reduction in terms of the residual waste, there is capacity at Allerton, there is capacity at Wilton, and there is capacity at Haverton Hill on the lines 1 and 2. Because the government says there is an overcapacity. Not Redcar and Cleveland, not an individual officer, government experts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Hope you're all with us on this debate. I've only got some comments to make because it's a complex issue, but one point I will make out, and you are interested about this, I'm no eco-warrior, all right? But I do care considerably about the people I represent. And I find it difficult to understand that we've been told there were 176 sites within the Tees Valley, all considered, and we end up in South Bank and Grangetown. I mean, come on, these people have suffered enough as it is, surely, and that can't be correct. So I certainly don't agree with that. We also talk about the area, surely I think it's the most southernmost point of the 7 the authorities that are involved. So what about all these wagons and whoever else is going to bring the rubbish to our area? You know, the carbon emissions from the wagons and whatnot, if that's what it's going to be. Will it be trains? I've no idea. But again, we're trying to get ourselves up on Redcar and Cleveland to call ourselves a great place to live, and yet you're going to go and allow an incinerator that we're just taking professionals' words. Do you believe them or don't you? I don't know. It's a very confusing issue. to my heart, the main concern I've got is the health of the residents that we represent. And again, statistics show that the area chosen, the health of residents is of the lowest area within our borough, and possibly, you know, we move on into regional areas. And I'm not totally convinced that this is the right thing that we need to do, to put an incinerator in this area again. It takes a lot of convincing for me to vote for it, and I'm sorry, you know, I just it's confusing. I understand the fors, the against, but fortunately we're not going to make a decision today. We're just going to, you know, fob it off and fudge the issue again and pass it on. But thanks for listening, and let's see what happens.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaway, please.
Thank you. I agree with you, Councillor Clark, although I think maybe in terms of fobbing off, we could say that we actually need more time, that this needs further scrutiny, it needs more explanation, because I don't know about you, but I feel that there can't be many councillors here today who have the knowledge to evaluate what the company man said and evaluate what Councillor Leroy said and decide who's right. You know, it's a very difficult position that we've been left in terms of trying to evaluate a lot of technical information. But another thing you said, one thing that isn't technical, and I got some information recently from one of our officers who said if you take the map of the country and look at the most deprived areas, and then you overlay on that where the incinerators are, it's the same places. So obviously that doesn't mean we don't need the incinerator, but it does surely mean we've got to have as much democratic accountability in the decision as we possibly can. And if we've managed to, you know, at the last minute, you asked Councillor Leroy about what difference the amendment make. Well, I think it's democracy is the difference that it makes. And that's what we need to get back into this process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Well, the Labour Group, we've accepted the amendment. We're recommending that it comes back to Cabinet. I sort of agree, Bill, a little bit in terms of the information, but we have had 5 years to look at this. It went through Cabinet a number of times, through the independent administration. It was delegated by them. We're going to abstain on the actual motion, just on the grounds of we need more information from the tender, which I apologise to councillors last time we were here. I moved a procedural motion, Tristan, so we could have that tender information, and the fact that you don't know the lease on the land and stuff is simply not good enough. And I would strongly urge officers to ensure that members do get that information. And it has to, if it's coming to Cabinet, we have to have that information. But also, look at all these people in the gallery today. I don't want to give them false hope. Like a vote today would, a lot of people out there in the public think that's just going to stop it, and it's not. It's a recommendation, so we have to deal with this delegation first. So on that grounds, on the original motion, we're just going to abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Grogan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following on off Councillor Clark, to be honest with you. I'm a Grangetown lad myself. I remember growing up in the 80s, my mum having to wash the clothes twice because of all the stuff that came out the sky back in the old days. And my children live in Grangetown. My mother lives in Grangetown and Esther, the Great Eston area. And for me, I'm sick of Teesside being treated as the smoggy capital of the country. We called smoggies all around the country because of what's happened in the past. I know this won't stop the decision today, and it's only a recommendation, but I feel like I have to speak about it. We've got all these different councils. Why can't it be built in, say, Gateshead or Byker or whatever Newcastle Council wants to have it? Or say, for instance, Spennymoor. They don't want it. They want to bring it to here. And I just can't sit in good consciousness think that this is a right decision for us to make today. It's just a little bit of how I feel, and that's all it is, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGuinness, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to say my speech today, but I think it is still relevant to what's gone on today. So first of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Leroy for bringing this motion to Council, and as always, he's shown us his knowledge and expertise in the subject. As councillors and officers, I feel we should really take on board and think carefully about how we approach this issue and in the future. We already have 4 localised incinerators, yet I sat with Councillor Leroy at the recent planning committee in January where another incinerator was proposed near Grangetown, this time to burn hazardous waste, and obviously waste transported from again another part of the country. Thankfully it got refused, which was the right decision at the time, but we all know too well how that played out. The TV ERF will be in operation, will not be operational until 2029 and would burn household waste from Newcastle, County Durham, Darlington, Hartlepool, Stockton-on-Tees, Middlesbrough and Redcar and Cleveland authorities. It is expected to run for 29 years thereafter, with the room to extend the contract for a further 11 years. A leading health worker from Newcastle said the new TV ERF could be a distraction from increasing recycling, and we could miss out on much more safer and more environmentally friendly ways to dispose of our waste. This incinerator in operation for this length of time leaves no incentives to recycle, but is an incentive to burn waste instead. As a local authority, we have a duty of care and an obligation to look after our residents and place another incinerator alongside 2 others in close proximity to Grangetown in TS6, one of the most deprived areas in the northeast, is absurd. They have already endured decades of poor air quality, and this combination of incinerators will only impact on the residents' already poor health outcomes. The decision was made by the previous administration in 2022 to accept this incinerator. Some councillors in this chamber were parties to that decision 3 years ago, but no blame must be felt or directed, as sometimes decisions are made incorrectly. I feel strongly that if the same incinerator plans were first brought forward today, in 3 years' time, the outcome would be completely different. As a council, we should be known we shouldn't be known for rectifying other areas' waste problems. Newcastle City Council said it could remove up to 90% of its household waste. We must learn more about recycling and the effects these incinerators have on the environment, air pollution, and the impact on population health. We as a Conservative group and some other concerned councillors have attended some local public meetings held by SINE, Stop Incinerator North East, some of which are here today, and listened to important facts from health specialists, and we all felt unanimously that there's a lack of education. I'll close today by mentioning this. Not the previous administration, but the councillors in this chamber today will be remembered for what happens next. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor L, please.
Thank you. I wanted to come back about the health aspects, because I feel very strongly that we look after the health of our population in Redcar and Cleveland.
Councillor L, can you speak into your mic so people can hear you? Sorry.
I feel very strongly that we care very much about the health of our population in Redcar and Cleveland, and people have already mentioned poor health in areas such as Grangetown. Industrial pollution is just one part of that. We're overlooking big things like smoking, for example. Decades of smoking. There's a very high smoking rate in Grangetown. We're looking at economic deprivation, which produces very wide health inequalities. Traffic, another big source of the PM 2.5 particles that Councillor Leroy alluded to. Industrial combustion. I'm not sure that your point about having the incinerators together and a conglomerate of PM 2.5 particles is actually accurate. And I would like to say that we measure air quality in the borough very stringently, and we make yearly reports to DEFRA about that. But yet we do take health very seriously, but don't overlook what causes most of the problems with the health of our population in the borough: smoking, obesity, inactivity. And then we have industrial pollution as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's all been said really, but briefly, we welcome the amended motion as we hope that it will make the remainder of the procurement process more transparent, and I feel transparency has been lacking so far in some of the aspects. We had a briefing earlier where members were promised information so we would be able to make an informed decision, but unfortunately we only had one part of the argument for the incinerator, which was unsatisfactory, and it was very disappointing. Over the next few months, hopefully more information will be made available, and particularly financial information, of which we have had very little so far. And Councillor Clark has already asked who is speaking for the residents of Grangetown and of South Bank in this room. We already take waste from Tyneside, Northumbria, from Merseyside, and now we have the hazardous waste plant to contend with as well. Well, I think that is enough. Let us have more aspirations for our local communities.
Thank you. Councillor Nightingale, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't actually going to speak, but I always break my rule. First of all, I think there are several dimensions to this. First of all, the decision-making process. The decision to delegate the final decision to the managing director at the time was when it was felt that we were very near to getting things in place. And I think those independent members who were on the cabinet at the time would probably agree with that. But since then, we've had COVID, we've had a cyber attack, we've had changes in circumstances, and we've had changes in control of the council. So trying to push the issue back onto the way the decision was made to delegate in 2019, 2020 is a bit dodgy. The second point I'd like to make is that ideally, I think there probably would be overwhelming consensus here in believing that the ideal solution right across the country would be to have regional centres of recycling and ERF, so that the public sector actually is responsible for dealing with recycling and dealing with the inevitable stuff that cannot be recycled. When we're dealing with this particular issue as well, this is the third point I want to make, the issues of health, and it was very informative from what Councillor Earle has just said, giving a wider dimension to the reasons for deprivation and so forth, rather than trying to pin this on the health issues entirely, on the contamination that comes from refuse burning. The second point is location, and the location was probably chosen at the time in 2017 when it was only Tees Valley councils that were concerned. So that explains why it is. Ideally, if we were having a regional one, it would be somewhere in the centre of region, but this is not on the table, is it? The other end, the environmental issues. The question really is, and it's a bit of a sophistry on the part of the Conservatives to say that the presentation wasn't good enough. The presentation was very detailed and was pretty complete. But the question in the end, as Councillor Hannaway has just said, it's who do you believe? Do we believe the arguments from the interest groups, or do we believe the arguments from the officers? And that is where, without the technical information, we are in a really difficult situation. There's also one other rule that we should be concerned with. We only know the past, we don't know the future, and there's very little point in saying, well, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen to the energy prices? What's going to happen to the government legislation and so forth? we are in a situation where we have to make a decision. And we have to make a decision on the basis of what evidence we've got at the moment. At the moment, it's not complete. And that's why I think it is important that maybe the decision is reconsidered and all the considerations that have been mentioned in the motion are actually mentioned. If we were only dealing with the items that are in the motion, I mean, I would quite clearly vote against this development. But there's another dimension to this, and that is what the officers have provided. And they did actually explicitly say in the presentation, and it's now published across the area, they did actually say that in terms of health and pollution and so forth, there was no worsening of the situation. But who do we believe? In the meantime, I think we probably have to go along with the idea that we put it in the hands of the Cabinet for the time being, and then it's up to them to make the decision. But this is one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to take as a councillor in nearly 40 years. And I think it probably is the same for every single member of this council. This is not an easy decision, and it's not a decision that we would really want to make if we could kick it into touch. But I think I've explained some of the the background to this, and why it was, in fact, in the first place, put in the hands of the Managing Director. Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, this is very close to Grangetown. Obviously, we have the closest residential population to this site. It's been a very difficult one for me, because I can see arguments on both sides of the tables. I've always been a supporter of investment, jobs. As the lead member of Waste, I know we need to be able to look at a best way to manage our waste going forward. But I also see the concerns that have been raised. I was hoping that the briefing, information and papers provided for this special meeting would be able to support one way or the other. Unfortunately, I have to agree with some members of this chamber that there is gaps within that information. So yeah, it didn't lead me to be able to make an informed decision. So on the original motion, I would have abstained for that reason. But I welcome the amendment. I support the amendment to bring it to Cabinet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies, to sum up.
We're on. Can you hear me? Good. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I aren't going to do the usual summing up and go through everyone's points that they've raised, because I think everyone's got their own valid reasons for wanting to say what they've said. But I will pick out a few of them, and I think when Councillor Brown mentioned about it being in the previous administration, I'm not going to disagree with you. But as I think Councillor Nightingale alluded to earlier, a lot has happened since then, and this now puts the onus back on, hopefully, councillors rather than officers, and it gives us more time, because even still now, after having that briefing earlier today, I still don't feel like I've got all the information that I need to have made a decision on the original motion at this point today. And if we hadn't ever managed to agree this change, then I would have probably been standing up now asking for us to kick the can down the road even further and have another special meeting in a few months' time, given that a final decision isn't probably going to get made or signed until later, till the end of this year. So I agree with him, but in hindsight, obviously, we were wrong at the time to give it to delegated authority. But ultimately, and I think a lot of the talk that's been said in this meeting today is on the actual development. Now, I'm under no illusion that any decision that we take, or whether we take back the control of the vote or whatever, isn't going to stop that incinerator from getting built, because it's already gone through planning, it's already going to go ahead. It's just a case of, does it go ahead with or without Redcar and Cleveland as a part of it? And And I think that's the key. And because we don't have sufficient knowledge, we don't have sufficient information, there's a lot of the financial information which I think is key to residents of this borough. Ultimately, we are here to make decisions that impact on our residents, and I don't feel that we've got all the information that we need to adequately go in favour or not on something like the contract that is potentially incoming later this year without knowing the impacts on potential council tax in future years, the consequences financially that will impact on all services across this council that are already stretched. So I feel that the best decision was this one, which enables us to look at more information as the year goes on. I don't mind working together with yourself and everybody else. Ultimately, we all want to get the right decision, and if that means that we look at all the detail as it progresses through the year, gives us more of an insight into what the impacts of that decision will be, we can then all sit around with the managing director and say, look, this is the consensus of the majority of the people on this council, and this is our reasons for it. And then we hopefully all make a combined joint decision on the fact that we're making the right decision and it's working perfectly for everybody in the borough. Yes, I know, but ultimately, in a cabinet meeting, we get to speak as councillors. So I would hope and implore that as many people in this chamber, if you've got an interest in it, when it does go to cabinet for that decision, we get to go along and we speak, and hopefully there is some resolvement at that cabinet meeting, and we can move forward and all be happy with the decision that is then taken. Thank you.
Right, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's carried. Thank you very much. And that concludes the today's meeting. Thank you very much, everyone attending, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.